Um, Basically, talk to me about the Garden of Eden
Okay.
and what your thoughts are on the Garden of Eden based on what you personally believe.
Well, with the Garden of Eden, you know, growing up and I went to Catholic school and I read the Bible and I was told stories from family members who are also Catholic. The Garden of Eden was supposed to be heaven on earth. And when God first brought man unto the world, it was supposed to be heaven. Everything was supposed to be there. And everything was perfect. And God said, don't mess around with that tree. The apple tree, don't mess around with it. You could, any other tree you want, you could do anything you want in the world. You'll be as happy as you want to, but don't mess with that tree. And, what I learned was Eve was very interested in the tree, as you would be. If just like human nature, if someone tells you not to want to do something, you're going to want to do it. And that's where she saw the snake, and the snake, which is the devil, said, "Hey, why don't you try it?" But also, what I thought about it as I got a little older, and I learned about that later on, is that knowledge. What the tree represents is knowledge, and sometimes you're gonna have to deal with some really ugly things when you learn about stuff. So God would says essentially in the Bible that, you know what, I want you to be happy because ignorance is bliss, right? And what some people can take away from the Garden of Eden is that Eve didn't listen to God, and when you don't listen to God, bad things can happen. Or, what I took away from it years later is that, knowledge is a dangerous thing sometimes, and sometimes bad things happen when you know things, and but that's a risk you take for knowledge.
Now, do you feel that you were talking about the symbols? Now, do you feel that these symbols that are in the Garden of Eden, Adam, Eve,
Sure.
the snake, the tree, the garden itself, do you feel that those are analogies, or do you feel that they are actual
Like literally,
events?
so are you asking me, do I believe that Garden of Eden was actually a place? It
Yes.
was real,
Do you feel that biblically it's real, or do you feel that it's an analogy?
I believe it's an analogy. Just like many stories in the Bible. As a journalist, I've been a journalist for the last 5 years, and I know that when I report something 5 minutes after it happens, it's my perspective on what it really happened. Do you see what I'm saying? So if there's a car crash and 5 people see it, and one of them being a reporter sees it, we're going to see it 5 different ways. Imagine that after 5 minutes, but 2006 years later. I have a very, very difficult time believing that things are literal, passed down from generation to generation to generation. So, for me personally, I believe it's more of a storytelling device than actual events that happen.
Very nice. All right, let's do the next topic.
Sure.
Mary Magdalene.
Mm-hmm.
Most Catholics feel that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute in the Bible,
Okay. I don't know if I agree with that, but
and there are many also who believe that.
it's just inferred, if anything. I don't think that there's a clear thing that says in the Bible, in King James Bible, which Catholics read, that says she was a prostitute or she was a whore. It's just all it mentions in the Bible is that Mary Magdalene is a sinner. What kind of sinner that is up for discussion. So it's unclear if Mary Magdalene is a prostitute in the Bible that American Catholics are reading today.
Right. Now, I believe that the church's official position is that she was not a prostitute.
Yeah.
Many people feel that she was,
Sure.
and it's actually based on a 13th century pope who had made that statement for purposes of making people feel like even they could be forgiven if a prostitute was forgiven.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, and for me, I went to Catholic school for most of my academic life, and Mary Magdalene was a very minor character in me growing up because all it was they used her, and I also majored in journalism and in English in university. So when you write a book or when you are creating characters, what you want to do is to establish that even this person that's so destitute is going to be saved and is going to be forgiven by God. So basically growing up and going to school, and when Mary Magdalene was mentioned, very minor character. I don't think each year in religion classes we would even spend more than a day on her, other than just to say that even though Mary Magdalene was this person that was a sinner, Jesus Christ and God were able to forgive her for her sins, whatever they were. All they mention of Mary Magdalene is that she was a sinner, and I personally believe that I'm not sure if she existed or not. I think that she was more there just to show people and to show believers and people that believe in Catholicism that Mary Magdalene, as bad as she was, the Spirit of the Lord would even get to her, the sinner that she was.
Very nice. Now, next topic is the cup of Christ.
Okay.
And basically, what we've got is for all accounts and purposes.
Mm-hmm.
This has nothing to do with the interview, by the way. But for all accounts and purposes, just to let you know what we're going to be talking about. This is something that didn't show up until about the 13th century.
Absolutely, during the Crusades.
In literature. However, most Catholics believe that it's an actual relic, never mentioned in the Bible anywhere, not talked about at all. So I wanted to get your feelings now on the cup of Christ and just whatever you have to say about it.
Sure. I mean, if you're a Catholic, the cup of Christ, or just any sort of Christian religion, you believe Jesus Christ and all of these things are real. You have to believe that if there was really a Jesus Christ, there has to be a cup of Christ. There has to be evidence of him surviving, and somebody must have it somewhere. But, for me personally, do I believe that there is a cup of Christ out there? Sure. I mean, but do I believe that it gives, that has some sort of power to make me invincible or other things like, you see during the Indiana Jones films or why so many kings in Europe wanted to find this? I mean, it goes back to, are you looking for the cup of Christ in the name of the Lord? Or are you looking for the cup of Christ for your own power and benefit? So I think that's the question. For me, I have a very, very difficult time with Catholicism in the terms of popes. Because if you look at history, they're not always men of God. I went to Rome maybe 8 years ago, and I went to St. Peter's Square. And underneath St. Peter's Square, many, many popes were buried. And, I think it was a really cool place. But something that really, really, I felt, that was very jarring and that was very telling was one of the popes decided to be, when he was buried, they actually cut a marble sculpture of him on top, and it was covered in gold. And what that made me think of is, what does that have to do with God? And what does that have to do with personal power? And, a lot of the doctrine that happened during that time was based on the Pope's infallibility. So as an individual and as a believer, it makes me think about that, and it makes me think about what people do in the name of the Lord, as opposed to their own ego and their own desire for power. So, makes me think whether I believe these things to be true or not. I believe that there is a cup of Christ. I believe that there is a shawl, like there's like the shawl that they...
The Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, the Shroud of Turin. I believe those things are true because, I believe that Jesus Christ was actually existed on this planet. But is there any sort of power to it? That's when that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whether I believe it has power or the issue of power in the first place, which has nothing to do with God or believing or being a good human being.
Right. Now, do you feel that the cup of Christ? It's obviously very much in the traditional ceremonies of the Catholic Church, very representative of taking the blood and of the body, and you
Yes.
drink of the cup, and it's representative of the cup that he used at the Last Supper.
Sure.
However, this cup was never mentioned anywhere in any sort of text,
Yeah.
and so, it just sort of, it's strange that it's embodied in both the practices, and yet it's, for all intents and purposes, not something that originated in any of the text.
Sure. And for me, what I believe is that the cup of Christ during masses, during Catholic masses, is just representative of the sacrifice that he gave to the world. The point of Jesus Christ dying on the cross, he didn't die on the cross for his own benefit, but for the benefit of everyone else. And as a weekly reminder of that, that's what we're representing. When people deviate from that and saying, hey, it's not this, the cup of Christ is literally, something that's out there, as opposed to, this is just, this just reminds us Catholics or us Christians of the sacrifice that Jesus made to save us from our own sins. So, that's what I think about that.
Well, very cool.